a transcending star, the greatest ever to have done it, and the face of the sport, or simply an exaggerated athletic career. What's up, guys? I'll be talking about the truth of Ronda Rousey's legacy and her career. First, I am not showing any kind of bias against or for Ronda Rousey. This is an objective view on Ronda Rousey's career and her legacy. I know there are a lot of Ronda Rousey fans. I know there are a lot of Ronda Rousey haters too. And I hope you guys can look at this through an unbiased view. Ronda Rousey was a transcending star. She was a global star, beloved by media and fans and people around the whole world. She was deemed to be unstoppable at one point, being able to face men in her own sport, often described as one of the greatest athletes, the most dominating athlete. These claims are definitely exaggerated, of course. Ronda Rousey was one of the biggest stars in the world. She was able to go to different countries and draw a very successful amount of numbers for her fights. Going into Brazil against a Brazilian and setting a very successful fight in terms of business numbers, and also being cheered in quote-unquote hostile territory. Also going into Australia and setting the record in Australia for an MMA event, even though her and her opponent were both from the United States. She was able to sell 1.1 million buys on 2 pay-per-views, even after her loss. So she is a big star of the UFC, one of the biggest stars ever in the sport. Even before this, she has claimed the face of women's MMA. Although she's not the first, the predecessor to that title was Gina Carano, but a devastating loss to Chris Cyborg, setting her into retirement, erased her face from that banner, and Ronda Rousey soon came to claim that title. She opened the eyes on women's athletics, opening doors for other women to compete in this sport and other sports. Also, people are not giving the credit to the media for this too. The media had a huge impact on Ronda Rousey's success also. People are giving Ronda Rousey all of the credit. Much of the credit deserves to go to the media and also her promoter. Without the media, without Dana White, without the UFC, Ronda Rousey would not be what she was. All of those variables together create the star of Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey then became the most important women's fighter to ever fight in the octagon. And she is, without a doubt, she is the most important. Don't get that mistaken with the best. And a lot of that came from timing, the competition, and also came from appearance and charisma. So as a global star, Ronda Rousey is huge, one of the biggest stars to ever grace the octagon. So far. I'm sure everybody's heard of it. Dana White has been saying women will never fight in the UFC. But then you have one woman who's one of the biggest stars to ever fight in your organization. But again, you got to give credit to the media as well as Ronda Rousey, as well as Dana White and the organization. It's not all Ronda Rousey. Without the media, without Dana White, without the UFC, Ronda Rousey's nothing. That's the truth. She is nothing without those three. There's Conor McGregor, there's Brock Lesnar, there's George St. Pierre, and then there's Ronda Rousey. Or you can say Ronda Rousey's above George St. Pierre. So she's up there, that's the point. So we've covered the success of Ronda Rousey outside of fighting, outside of the cage. So then we look at her record. Ronda Rousey amassed a 12-2 record, 12 wins, 2 losses, and has never gone to the decision. She actually has never gone past the 3rd round. Her longest fight was 3 rounds with Miesha Tate in the rematch. Ronda Rousey's been fighting since 2011. 2011, that's a very short career. 5.5 years about. And the fact that she could not rise up against the fighters 5.5 years later. And you look at Holly Holm, you look at Amanda Nunes, they have actually been fighting longer than she has at a professional level. But then you look at Amanda Nunes has actually been fighting longer than Ronda Rousey for 3 more years. Amanda Nunes has been fighting in MMA for 8 to 9 years. And she's at the top now. She's the best right now in her division. And the fact that Ronda Rousey cannot fight or be able to compete with her, a fighter who's been fighting in this sport for longer than she has, this speaks about her career. It speaks about her legacy. Because people want to throw out that Ronda Rousey, oh, she's a pioneer, she's been fighting forever. No, she's actually has not been fighting. She's actually one of the youngest fighters. She hasn't had wars. She's been beating women in like 14 seconds without taking any damage. As people have been saying, this is a young person's sport. The fact that the older fighters, or the fighters that have been fighting longer at this sport, are evolving faster and more efficiently than the younger Ronda Rousey. Yes, people will tell me, what are you saying? Amanda Nunes is younger than Ronda Rousey by like 2 years or whatever. Not in fight years. Amanda Nunes has been fighting longer than Ronda Rousey. She has more miles on her. She's been through more wars than Ronda Rousey. Ronda Rousey's been beating opponents very quickly. But then she fights a different fighter and who's older than her by a considerate amount, and she doesn't show the necessary evolution in her skills to compete with the older fighter, which she should have evolved even further. She gets pummeled easily. It's not even a contest. It speaks about her legacy. Before her first loss, Ronda Rousey was exaggerated to this all-time great, quote-unquote, once-ever kind of athlete. She was hypothetically put into fights with men in the same weight class as her. Others have put her against one of the boxing greats, Floyd Mayweather. And others were confident that she would be able to fight into another sport, such as boxing, and beat Olympic boxers, men and female, and also drew great criticism from the BJJ players when people would throw her name into the elites of BJJ, like Mackenzie Dern and even Gabby Garcia. This is before her loss. People had this high regard for Ronda Rousey in terms of all combat athletics. Of course, it was very exaggerated. But the thing was, many people believed it. Many people believed that she could beat Floyd Mayweather in the octagon or even in a street fight. People thought that she could beat Olympic boxers without having really any formal, pure boxing training and beat the best BJJ players today. Many of these claims came from her own camp. Many of these claims came from her supporters and people who were just traumatized and just dazed by the career of Ronda Rousey, by her legacy at that point, where she was beating other females in 14, 16 seconds record time. Two of her title fights are among the fastest in the top 5 in UFC history. 14 seconds against Kat Zingano and 16 seconds against Alexis Davis. She shows some of her striking skills against Sarah McMahon and against Besh Correa and also against Alexis Davis. So people were quick to pull her name and throw her into the elite of every other combat sport because she was quote unquote doing it all and doing it all very easily. If you look on paper just by numbers and just by a glance over her career and a glance over her record, it seems pretty impressive. Winning fights in 14 seconds, winning fights in 34 seconds, never going past the third round. This, looking at just that without looking at the competition, that's impressive. But the truth, if you go into her fights and you look at who she's fighting also, it takes away from the greatness. No disrespect to any of Ronda Rousey's opponents, but they were not the best fighters. They were good fighters at the time, but when you compare it to today, it's not really too impressive. Yet people overlooked the competition. They were looking at the star Ronda Rousey. She was shining. The opponent did not matter, as they said. It was almost a Mike Tyson effect. It didn't matter who Mike Tyson was fighting. It doesn't matter who Ronda Rousey is fighting. She's gonna win. We want to see her doing it in an amazing way at some really short amount of time. Instead of just glancing over the octagon, you look at the opponent she's fighting also. She didn't fight any opponent that was well-rounded. All of Ronda Rousey's opponents were all grapplers with no footwork and no real striking pedigree. Minus Besh Correa. But Besh Correa is not some elite striker. So where does she fit? No disrespect to Besh Correa, but her skills do not match up. Even though you would categorize Besh Correa as a striker, her striking was actually worse than Ronda Rousey's and most of the opponents Ronda Rousey has faced. But the rest, Liz Carmouche, Alexis Davis, Miesha Tate, Kat Zingano, Sarah McMahon, they're all grapplers. Tough grapplers, but they're all grapplers with very little footwork skills and a mediocre or average, if that, striking. Her opponents that she was fighting also fit to her style. It was very easy for Ronda Rousey to clinch with the opponent because the opponent didn't have any necessary footwork. But then again, this is all there was though. She was beating who they had. They gave her the best opponents they had at that time. Some people are saying, but where's Chris Cyborg? I agree. That fight should have happened a long time ago. It didn't happen for whatever reason. In the 135-pound division, in the UFC, of what they had, she fought them. And she beat them. Okay, so you can't blame her for that. But then she fights Holly Holm. And Holly Holm, very well versed in striking, amazing footwork, and we finally got to see what happens when Ronda faces a different kind of opponent, or in this case, a striker with great footwork. Kat Zingano, Miesha Tate, all of her opponents are on one side of the spectrum. Besh Correa is a little bit to the middle, and then you have Holly Holm on the complete other side. And we could say Holly Holm is probably the best striker and probably has the best footwork that Ronda Rousey has ever faced in the cage and also in her gym. And we've seen what happened. And then afterward, Ronda Rousey fought against Amanda Nunes. Without the speculation of where Ronda's head was at, without looking at that, because we don't know, I addressed this before, we don't know what she was thinking, if she was broken or anything, we really don't know any of that. She fought a well-rounded opponent this time, not just a striker, not just a grappler. Amanda Nunes is the most well-rounded fighter in that division. All Amanda really needed was her striking and her footwork. Different than Holly Holm, but that's really the general aspect. Striking and footwork. She stood no chance. It was a fight that should not have been made. That's what it looked like. It looked like an amateur versus a professional. So we really got to see what Ronda Rousey's weakness was. So she had the right opponent for years and years until she fought someone different. We seen where her strengths do not show effect. People are very quick to say how great Ronda Rousey was at the time. But I'm not here to say that Ronda Rousey was not great at all. For what she has done, she's still right now one of the best ever. If I want to get specific, she's most likely not in the top 3 of my personal list, but she's outside of that. But then again, female fighters in the UFC are very young in the sport. And what I mean by that, people will say, but look at Miesha Tate has been fighting for 10 years. The female fighters before the UFC did not understand their potential. They did not see their potential. Look at Miesha Tate in Strikeforce. Miesha Tate never progressed really in her skills. Once she got to the UFC, she was a better fighter. She started to realize her potential. Every fighter did. Every single fighter did. You look at Amanda Nunes. Amanda Nunes was always just a grappler until she got in the UFC, had a couple fights, and then completely evolved into a well-rounded fighter. When Ronda Rousey got into the UFC, she was handed the belt right away. She was part of the infancy of female fighters in the UFC. So Ronda Rousey sprung up to the top right away. Right in the beginning of the UFC, she was the top. She was the best. So she had no real vision. What are most fighters' goals? To become champion, to become the best in their division. Of course, some have bigger aspirations, some have bigger goals, but that's what most of them do. Ronda Rousey was given that goal right in the beginning. So where was she really going to go from there? She already set the bar in her first fight in the UFC. So where did she really want to go from there? She was already the best. Personally, I thought Chris Cyborg was always the best, but people gave Ronda Rousey the title as the best. So what was Ronda Rousey's goal after that? Ronda Rousey wanted to become the only undefeated champion in the UFC. She wanted to become unstoppable, undefeated throughout her whole career. And she never accepted the possibility that she could lose. What did she used to say? I am prepared to beat the best on my worst day. It's a good way of thinking, but she never accepted the possibility that she could lose in any aspect of the sport. And she was at the top. So how is she going to progress her skills and also evolve herself when she's already at the top and she thinks she's unstoppable? What is the point of progressing at that point? And who does she have to look at to progress? Who is her coach to evolve her game to? So in her mind, most likely, she was thinking, no one has equal skills to me. I can beat Olympic boxers. I can beat the elite of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at BJJ. I can beat kickboxers at their own game. I could beat wrestlers at their own game. This was her mindset. So, in her mind, she was the best everywhere. She looked at herself as the perfect fighter, or just about. Of course, many of these things came into her head from people in her camp, which is very, very wrong, but it happened. So what happens is, she gets put up against Holly Holm, right? Holly Holm is probably the best boxer, and also probably kickboxer Ronda Rousey has ever faced, ever even sparred with, probably. And Ronda Rousey completely threw out the option that Holly Holm could beat her, even in the striking match. Ronda Rousey's plan was to box with Holly Holm and show that I am the best boxer, not Holly Holm, the 18-time champion. I'm the best boxer. The fight comes, and Holly Holm clearly dominates Ronda Rousey on the feet. And it completely destroyed Ronda Rousey's ego in that fight. Because Ronda Rousey, one, could not strike with her. Then she couldn't take her down. And all of that chaos in the fight, Ronda Rousey was probably having her own fight in her head during that fight. I'm the best boxer, I'm the best kickboxer, I'm the best whatever. And then she finds out she's not. The only thing she was really the best at was judo and clinch work, probably. That's really it. Ronda Rousey is probably showed to have the best judo or effective judo in the UFC. Of course, you look at her competition and who she can use that against. But she did show some judo effectiveness, such as the Kat Zingano fight. That was impressive. That was very impressive the way she was able to do that. Of course, Kat Zingano made a huge mistake, but the technique there was present. But then again, judo has never shown to be effective in the UFC. Of course, I'm not throwing out the possibility that someone can come out and use effective judo and completely dominate elite fighters too. It'll take a fighter to do that. So, Ronda Rousey, she was a good fighter. She was a good fighter. She had good grappling skills. Exaggerated legacy at the time, yes. People are starting to figure that out. In combat and fighting capabilities, of course, Ronda Rousey is not the best. Of course. When it comes to importance to women's MMA and also female sports, that is where she is one of the best. People still look up to Ronda Rousey, and she has shown that female sports are also entertaining as well. They're also important as well. Even though she lacked in some skills, she showed a mass audience around the world that women who compete in sports can also entertain just as much as the men. Some of her fights, you cannot deny, were actually very entertaining to watch. And that's another aspect as to why so many people were attracted to her, is because the way she fought too. She showed people it's not just the men. Us women, we can perform too. We can show our athletic ability. We can put everything on the line for the fans and everyone. And that's a very good outlet for every other woman athlete. She created doors for other females. In the case, she is not the best by any means. When it comes to importance of the sport and female athletics, there she is in high regards. So that is the truth of Ronda Rousey's legacy. That is my take on it also. You may have a different take, you might disagree. I can imagine some people might disagree because many people look at Ronda Rousey in a different lens. I'm looking at her career and her legacy in the most unbiased way I can. And this is what I see. This is the truth that I see from it. So that is the video, guys. If you guys disagree, if you guys agree, be sure to leave it in the comments because I'm very curious to see what you guys think also. I'll definitely read your guys' comments. I'll definitely reply to them. So thank you guys for watching this video. Be sure to give this a thumbs up. In my next video, I'm going to give my predictions on the UFC main card coming up and also my predictions on Fedor Emelianenko versus Matt Mitrione. I could probably say I want to see that fight more than the UFC fights because I'm a huge Fedor fan, always been. So I'll see you guys in the next video.